Abusuanyambo enro eye park committee na ye call a Ministry of Interior then Nanado Dankwa Akufo-Addo's administration. Na payment be a cost so na 3 billion plus Ghana cedi. Na what is current administration by payment aye payment but with the current outstanding claims omo ede koye na eno so ejinamu pampe se ekawe omu entuaye be sure say yembo enwura committee nim na yenhwe ensema hodo a onua ekoso ewo ho GH Politics Avenue.
And for one reason or the other, they are unable to complete after a year or two, then it gets abandoned. For many reasons. One, lack of payment. Two, the longer that it takes to get it completed, then it becomes unprofitable. Then the contractors are no longer interested. They want variation. They want you to be able to, revalue for the actual values to be paid, so that it to be profitable, and the front and back. So one of the things that we did since we came was to task the Inspector General of Police, who is here, to try and see all those such uncompleted projects, whether we can put all of them together and tell the stages at which they are. Then we can try, as you know, yes, they say the money must come from the Mother Ministry, but I know, Madam Chair, you are much aware that we also go cap in hand to finance to try to explain and get the understanding that this should be completed. I want to say that what we have is not even the complete, because some of the projects, I know there's a project in Tamale that have been there since the 70s. Some of them were not captured because it's like these are long overdue, so they've not been captured. Currently, the Inspector General of Police and his team are trying to put all of them together. But the one that you have seen is just about 100 million. But the interesting thing is that this year, the total capital expenditure, as approved by Parliament, by the Minister of Finance and Parliament, is only 10 million for police. Meaning that any attempt to even imagine that you could even start addressing it will be deceiving yourself. But we are working with the Ministry of Finance to see how we can salvage this project, because each of them is a very important project, and that's why they were initiated. We cannot now assume that they are no longer important. So we are working with the Ministry of Finance to see how we can be giving space. And I must commend the Ministry of Finance for what they are doing now. They won't let you start anything that they have not made budgetary allocation to. And that is why today, no project is started from the Ministry of Interior unless we get commitment authorization from the Ministry of Finance and have a budget line that shows that we can start. If we can't finish in a year, then we indicate that it will be a multi.
I want to move on to another infraction that your ministry was cited for. That is where I think we have all the security agencies in there as well. That about 3 billion of commitments had been settled already in 2024 per the review of the payment records, yet they were included in the outstanding claims. I think it's part of the 10.3 billion that was rejected outright. So if our people can, the various agencies can throw some light on it, how something that had already been committed and settled was included in.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I will let it start from the ministry itself. So the Chief Director will speak to those specific, those that, because yes, we went for the validation meeting at Ministry of Finance where they had to take all those that were repeated. And so I'll let her speak first, then I'll let them speak in 10 so that everybody will speak for himself. Just to remind you, Madam Chair, almost all the service commanders here were not there when those instructions were done. So when it gets to their turn, they may call the relevant officers who were there to answer, if you permit us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. But Minister, like I said, this is not to accuse anybody of anything. There are structural issues that we want to address. So for me, it is not just a matter of speaking to it, but what have you put in place to make sure these things do not reoccur, especially when there's a change in government and then we are looking at the stock of liabilities that we have. That is when you see these huge sums of money. So whether they were there or not, there's continuity in government. And what I want to see is, yes, this has been, on this occasion, this was the commitment that had already been paid, but yet was included. Moving forward, these are the checks and balances that I have put in place so that these things wouldn't occur again. I mean, that's all.
Well, Madam, I perfectly agree with you. I know. I just wanted each of them to speak briefly about what happened. Then I'll tell you what we are trying to do to make sure that those things do not repeat themselves. So maybe, if you permit me, if you permit me, I will let the Chief Director start. Because one of the things that I can tell you, Mr. Chair, that I noticed, which I had to write officially to the Minister of Finance, most of the time, and with a greater respect, Madam Chair, you were the Minister of Finance, you get agencies writing straight to the Minister of Finance without passing it through their sector ministers. So you'll be sitting there, then all of a sudden something comes up, you are not aware. Or they have sent something and now they forward it to you again, then you now send it again, then before you realize the repetition is happening. So I had to write officially to the Minister of Finance that, in fact, to make it mildly, when we went for that validation meeting, I vehemently told the Chief Director that if you don't let them pass their expenditures and letters through me, don't ever call me to come and answer for them, but I won't answer for anything that did not pass through me. So this is one of the things that we are doing to make sure that all these kind of double letters or multiplications are avoided. And for example, with the heads of the agencies themselves, for example, if I take, let's say, immigration, you have a situation where he has 3 deputies, and each of them could write a letter to finance through me. You have IGP, has a lot of directors, I mean, director for technical, director for...
But that's why there's division of labor, and rightly so. That is how it's supposed to be. You don't take on something that you are not seeded with the technical know-how. So I think it is perfect that we do it this way, so that when we hear from the Director of Finance, we know that this is where it's coming from.
It was paid at Minister of Interior, so I'm sure maybe when they went, they didn't get the right figure. Thank you.
So moving forward, how are we going to prevent such reoccurrences? For me, that's my...
Moving forward, the Chief Officer has instituted a committee that will be doing a reconciliation of all the indebtedness that we have, so that some of these things are not repeated. Thank you.
And I think you should also have a manual way of doing it, monthly reconciliation of some of these things, your commitments, your debts, and all those things. I think you should have some structured way of checking, of verifying, so that any day, any time, should your minister require of you to show things like this, I mean, you would be in a very good position to give an up-to-date data so that you don't have some of these reoccurrences, please. I think it's fine. The other one, you have a follow-up.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The person who just spoke from Fire Service, Finance Director, disputed the figure. And this has implications on our final report. So with your permission, I'd just like to invite the auditors to respond to that, please.
That's the 3.8 million, right?
Yeah, we hear the question.
No.
You can let him repeat it. Go ahead.
Honorable, please, can you repeat your question again, please?
So the Finance Director says the figure is not 3 million, and that part of it was settled probably by them and another by the ministry itself. And so that distinction is not clarified in your report. which will largely have an implication on our final report as to what amount was totally rejected, what remained to be substantiated, and what was approved. And so we need you to speak to it so that we can straighten the record.
Right.
Yeah.
So indeed, the schedule that was given to us from Ministry of Finance had the details. And for Interior, there were, I think, about 8 sub-agencies under Interior. So we needed to work with them to validate the numbers. What has been reported here as unsupported through the process remains that then the information wasn't provided during the validation process for us to confirm that they were indeed commitments, since it being reported. And the working schedule we have is supporting the work that we did.
So I think the project involved is a construction of a 3-story appliance bay at the squad room and offices at the national headquarters. And what you claim, the auditors claim, is that payment of some 3,084,000 was made as at November 2024. Was made as at November 2024. And he is now claiming that that payment was not made from their end.
Not all was paid for.
So, Chair, please, the evidence we cited affirmed that that payment has been made, and is the reason why it was captured as such in our report.
But you see, it brings to for the issue of communication between the audit service or the auditors and the agency involved. Because, I mean, this is a contract about 5 million. They paid 1-point-something million at their end. He claims that the Ministry of Interior paid the remaining 3 million. And you still let this appear in the books as if it's an outstanding commitment, or, I mean, that needs to be cleared.
Honorable Chair, you know, we were given an amount to validate. At the end of the process, we had to account for each. Even if it is rejected, we have to account for it. That is why it's reported.
But I think it's the explanation or the notes to the figure that you could have, I mean, sort of made it a bit clearer than what it is now. But I think what Minister said will cure some of these things. If it comes through one channel, tomorrow they will be in a better position to account for it fully, that I know it came from one source. And so when I'm accounting for it, I take the whole thing and then account for it properly. But to be honest with you, these things keep reoccurring. And so we need to look at it and see how best we can structure some of these things. I'm happy with what the Minister said. Minister, getting one source for giving out commands and sending out some of these things is not the only way. I think you should also have stricter measures, such that maybe you already have it, that you have limits, that beyond a certain limit, person A cannot do this. Beyond a certain amount, person B cannot do this. So all these things will help. So that if you see a payment that is beyond 5 million, you know, oh, it is your chief director. If you see a payment below 5 million, it is the deputy. You understand? Maybe if you can put some of these things in place, and it will help us check some of these things. But clearly, it all boils down to reconciliation, constant reconciliation, making sure we reconcile monthly, reconcile quarterly with what we have. This will go a long way to check some of these things.
Madam Chair, well noted, and thank you so much.
And then the auditors are also saying that payables amounting to 3.3 billion were not recorded in GIFMIS.
Well, Mr. Chair, I hope the Chief Director could speak to this, if you don't mind.
Madam Chair, for all that I know, any transaction that is done in the ministry, it is done through the gift list. When this particular issue came to our attention, we requested for documentation for us to know exactly what they are talking about. But up to now, we've not received any documentation. So we'll go back to them for them to give us the documentation that shows that this particular transaction didn't pass through GiftMe. For all that I know, every transaction is done through the GiftMe platform. Thank you.
Auditors, would you want to respond?
Chair, please, the transactions we validated, documentation was provided, and we had details of the information they provided for us to validate. What we are affirming is those transactions in GiftMe. And throughout the process, we've had, so we had a debrief meeting before we exited. We had another meeting at finance to explain those details in terms of the specifics, which we couldn't cite in GiftMe, although we validated a number of them. So this was a recommendation that going forward, there was a need to ensure that those transactions are properly reflected in GiftMe.
So we'll be happy. We'll step this down and be happy for you to share the transactions amounting to 3.3 that you discovered were not on GiftMe.
Right.
And then they, in turn, will validate as to whether truly it happened or it did not happen. So we'll be happy to we'll step this down, do that exercise, and then we can incorporate the findings into our report as well, because this is a very serious issue that we need to clear as soon as possible.
Mr. Chair, if you permit me, I'm not an expert in financing, but Madam Chair, you have been Administrator of Finance. You and I know there's no way any payment will get to controller if it's not through the GiftMe system. Unless there's a way that people can walk to controller with documentation that has not gone through the GiftMe. So if truly this is something that has happened, it is something worth not just cross-checking document. It's worth investigating that people could get to controller level without passing through the system. I mean, for me, it's even a crime. So, Madam, I agree with you. We must get them to get the facts, and let's interrogate it properly so that we'll see which method was used to get that to controller, so that we can make sure that it never happens. So I agree with you that this is something that they must provide us with the details. Thank you.
Yeah, Minister, that is the norm. We all hope that everything goes through GiftMe, but sometimes things happen. That is why I want them to let you have the document where the 3.3 for you to cross-check and validate whether truly this is the situation before we can incorporate it into our report.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much. To the Acting Chief Director, I would like to find out from you during the exit meeting, were you at the exit meeting with the auditors?
Yes, I was there with my minister.
That's what we requested for those information.
Okay.
And that is where we requested for those information, sir. Thank you.
So, Minister, I think on this note we have dealt with your security agencies, and what is most important is the controls that you put in place and the constant reconciliation to prevent some of these occurrences happening in future. And so with this, we'd like to invite NIA to also come in. There's an issue with, maybe we'll have to discharge you, Chairman.
Well, Chair. Well, Chair, I mean, I'm happy if we are done with the service commanders. I can assure
yes, that had to do with the stalled construction projects,
Yes.
and the paid commitments.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are some small issues,
Yeah.
which boils down to system controls
Yeah.
and reconciliation. And I'm speaking to all the security heads as well, that let's do some of these things. Check our system, make sure we are on top of the system, put controls in place, and also in terms of reconciliation, let us do it constantly. If you can get one person in charge of that so that the person can own it. Usually when you say it's for a division, there's no ownership per se. But then when you have one officer doing that consistently, the person knows that if anything should happen, it is me they will call. And then the person can own up and make sure, they discharge their mandates as is expected of them. So that is one thing I would advise all the security agencies to look into doing. And you continue with the controls at your end. And also at the agency level, please have your controls and systems up and doing so that you can prevent some of these.
We and some who team course or channel so, Mammy and I was so jemre. That send us all body any their dumbi, a dumiani, onya, they be saying Asia.